with Mahanati, like, I mean, I met Nag Ashwin, like, we had soup one night of the end of monsoon, at the beginning of monsoon in Hyderabad, and 2 days later we were shooting, you know. So yeah, so I was scared. I was like, okay, it's very complex. Like, how are we gonna do it? It's like, oh, we'll take it, we'll take it. And the first day was very beautiful because there were scenes from the Mahanati from some Savitri movies. We shot three of them. Uh, they were tricky, the Dutch sisters. I have to say, without my knowledge, they put three stages within one stage, right? So I
Okay.
didn't allow them after that. I was like, guys, like, this is tricky. Don't do this again. So they had like three different stages. And it was a test shoot in a way, right? Because we had a 16 camera, we had the Alexa, we had a few things, but we actually did our camera tests with everything, with Keerthy Suresh, getting into the Mahanati skin and shooting those scenes. Because I'd watched those movies and I watched those moments. Um, I talked to Nag. It's like, well, do we wanna replicate it completely? And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, kind of. And I was like, well, but you're using a different aspect ratio. So,
Mm-hmm.
if we're modernizing it to like current India, maybe we also should like also think about how lighting has progressed, within these years. Like, obviously, like the lights of that time were heavy and huge because the sensibility of film was nowhere close to like how sensitive our
Digital.
yeah ours is right now. Vision 3 from Kodak, or the Alexa, or now it's crazy, like the Sony Venice can go to 32 ISO, so 3200. So yeah, so I was like, let's try it. So we use less light. We adapted that, like we adapted to like contemporary lighting, and that's how we shot those three scenes. And the moment we did, like, everyone knew this movie was gonna work, because
Of
Keerthy
course.
Suresh was Savitri, she just
Mm.
was, and costume was great, art was awesome, and we decided, how we were gonna shoot it back there, like there and then.
So,
Very nice.
quick question, just an add-on, because you were actually saying about this. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually,
Sorry,
sorry. I just
yeah.
break people, so sorry. Okay, so you were saying that the first thing you guys shot was the scenes that you have to replicate of Savitri Garu.
Yeah.
So, did you guys shoot that in real by any chance? Because like, or you shot it digitally and just use the black and white filter and I mean reduce the
So
saturation and all.
yeah, that's a good question, and we were doubting as well
Mm-hmm.
because because film had gone. Film is dead now. Like, I
Yeah.
just a short film on 16 millimeter here in Spain last week, and it was so difficult because there's no labs anymore. Like, we don't have any lab in Spain.
Mm.
The lab that people were accessing was in the UK, but now, with Brexit, like, it's gone. So there's one small lab in Malaga in the south of Spain, but that's artisanal, and that's more for like I've used it for experimental projects. But this is a commercial short film. So we contacted the Cine Lab in Romania,
Mm-hmm.
which I worked with The Pass for Polar, this thriller, and the was also shot in 16, and yeah, like, the same doubts we had back then. I had 1 week back, like, oh,
Okay.
transportation, like, how do we know dailies are good? So all of this was on the Dad sisters heads. I think
Okay.
Nat really wanted to shoot film me too, but we were
Okay.
like, not, maybe not the full movie. Maybe we can do, we tried 35 that day. We tried
Mm-hmm.
35, 16, and Alexa. We tried the three
Mm.
cameras, and we rolled the scenes. Because the ISOs of those things were not compatible. We
Mm.
shot we shot them separately. I think I don't think we shot them together like at the same time, but
Okay.
we certainly tried like all of them, you know. And then we went to at that time the lab in Bombay was still working, so we
Mm.
went there, and we saw the rushes, and Nag was like he was in love with it. You know, Keerthy Suresh on celluloid. He was like, oh my god, this is great, bro. And then and then we sat down and we're like, you know what? Like, we're gonna shoot this stuff that doesn't have criticism on film, and the rest on Alexa. Like,
That's
because
interesting.
yeah, it was an interesting conversation because obviously the first idea that you could have is like, okay, so Savitri's life, Satyaka's life, like that's older, so let's shoot that in film, and then shoot present in Alexa. But that's not how it is. Like
Mm.
we're going back already to the 80s, you know?
Mm. Mm.
So actually, we decided like, okay, because because Samantha is in the present, she would
Cool.
actually be on film, right?
Okay.
She would be the
Okay.
one with celluloid because, and we actually used a lot that related to how movies were shot at that time, because
Mm. Exactly.
because how labs worked at the time,
Mm.
how the prints actually got a little sloppy and had that dirty look. So
Exactly.
we wanted that for that. And then in a way, like everything else, is Samantha's like imagination. So
Exactly.
Samantha's
Yeah.
imagination would be different, She would think about this, grand moments, and we would enhance the life as well. Like we would do a progression with that life, because I mean Savitri's life is actually the movie, The other thing is like a way to enter and to understand where you go, right? Different perspectives of her life. So we also thought about like progression in Savitri's life, and you know and that actually the costume designer, obviously she works in they work in decades, right? So
Mm.
she's like,
Mm.
oh, Danny, the 40s are like this, and like Danny, the 50s are like this, and I was like, so we sat down for many, many, many sit downs at Vayanti movies, and I didn't understand because obviously, like, is this scene from the 50s? No, that's the 60s. Then it's like, and this is 40s. So, at some point I was like, how am I doing this? Like, obviously the costumes have to be like attached to some realism of the
Yes.
Uh,
time that they're in. But
uh,
what's important in the movie is how she is at the time, right? Her psyche.
okay.
And that's
Okay.
where, I sat down with Nag and I was like, how about if we, instead of going through the decades and like changing our camera for the decades, Savitri changes the camera, right? And he was like, "How do you
Cool.
like?" Well, for her early life, she's in a small town, so let's have a camera that moves a lot and like kind of goes like a child, and everything is kind of the colors of the earth and the woods, like nothing stands out, and we'll use very naturalistic lighting, and obviously I mean I have to say this, like I wasn't aware of how good the location scouting for this movie is, but after shooting a lot in Hyderabad, I have to say like I mean, like kudos to the whole team because we shot in beautiful locations, like that I wasn't
That's
aware
true.
of. Most of the time
Uh,
because I'm a foreign person in Telangana,
Yeah.
we just go
yeah,
there
yeah.
and be like, not this good, like let's do this in the evening, blah blah blah. But like those locations were excellent, like where we shot the childhood of Mahanati. Then she goes to Chennai for the first time, and that's where we introduce some colors of flowers, like mild colors of flowers that are like
Yeah.
more like yellow, right? Or
Yeah.
green. Like, and then suddenly, like, this is subtle and probably people don't know, but I started using some diffusion filters, so
Okay.
like it becomes like a kind of like a dreamy world, in which she's in.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
And the moment she hits stardom, that's when we change from spherical lenses to anamorphic because
Oh, okay.
Oh,
she entered the film world, and
The
film, like right now we kind of have that. It's a contemporary notion, obviously, because
okay.
there were no anamorphics at that time. But
Yeah.
when we shoot anamorphic right now, it looks more cinematic for some reason. So that's where, like it just, pops in your head, right? So we use Hawk VCD V lights. Hawk is a very good anamorphic lens, and the V lights are my favorite. And still, as the farther she goes, the more we diffuse, the more we diffuse, the more we diffuse, the more we diffuse, until, like suddenly, boom, like envy starts coming.
Yeah.
Right? And
Exactly.
we have the perspective of Dulquer, which
Complete orange and teals come now.
exactly, who's an amazing
Yeah.
actor, like, and
Yeah.
suddenly, like, we see like his mind, and suddenly, like, it's the same. It's still anamorphic and it's still diffuse, but the light is gone. He sucks the light.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Gemini
oh,
Ganesh sucks the light of the film, and suddenly it
Okay.
becomes really dark. And that's where, drinking comes, and then there's the different stages in which we go back and we take all the diffusion out and we go back to spherical, and then we end in spherical as well. I
oh,
Okay.
think there
that's
is
that's
nothing which
just
has like an upfall, and that's when, and like, because we thought about like how, and this is something that I also did in another movie. That, I mean, this is how Nag actually found me. It's related to colors, and it's related to what I'm gonna tell about the ending of Mahanati.
Okay.
I shot this movie called Sampachattar, year 75, year 1975. It's
okay.
about the emergency year. It's a political thriller, and it's not out because it's banned.
Oh,
But
okay.
everyone has
Okay.
seen it.
He started
But
searching for it.
everyone's seen it, which is something very surprising of India. It's like, how did, like, I really like your work. So Nag watched that movie, and
Oh.
she thought it had a very different way of portraying vintage, of portraying time period. And, it was the first time that he was doing a period movie, and he wanted something different. So what we found for that movie, Navneet Behel, the director, and I, we were looking at photos of the era of 1975, and obviously, like, the first layer of film or photos, at that point for celluloid is blue, because blue is the color that we are least capable of catching. It's
Hmm.
the less sensitive
We
color
can't.
that we have. I think we only have 5% in the
Yes.
macula of our eyes for
Yes.
those tones, right? So the first color,
Mahanati ends in blue.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So we devoided the movie of blue, and you don't notice it,
Okay.
but like, the moment blue comes in, it's like, suddenly it's the note that you were restraining from,
Okay.
it's the
Yeah.
font that you didn't use, throughout the whole piece. And suddenly blue comes in, and like, I mean, I every time I'm hitting the movie, I'm crying. Everyone gets really emotional. I remember my parents watching it, on the first day, first show at Prasad
Hmm.
Labs.
Hmm.
Went there with them, and they don't understand Telugu. Obviously, there were no subtitles,
Yeah.
and they just understood it through images, which was, the best compliment that I could get. So yeah.
Cool.
Well, awesome, awesome.
Nice.